Hey, y'all. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, our friend, former NFL player and president of Gallery Built Homes, Jason Starkey. We talk about his addiction while he was playing football and how that progressed and what his life looks like today. So tune in. It's a really great one. Thanks. Welcome to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I'm your host, Sarah Pritchard. This is a podcast where we dive deep into the real, uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating, no judgment, just honest conversations that can help lift up the solution. So let's get started today. I am so excited and super happy you're here. We have a very special guest, former NFL player and currently president of Gallery Built Homes, Mr. Jason Starkey. How are you?
I'm good, Sarah. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad you're here and you made the trip. It means a lot to us, so thank you.
It means a lot to me, too. It's always good to come to Birmingham, Alabama, and
Yes.
I'm really impressed with the space you've created here in this podcast, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we were just talking. I was hoping that you had gotten some better sleep last night than before, because last night when we were at dinner, the guys were talking about going to a basketball game, and I was like, he can't go. He got 3 hours of sleep last night.
And I was all in. I was
Yeah.
ready to roll tide and have that experience. But honestly, when my head hit the pillow, I crashed immediately, which was like would we eat dinner at 6? So
Yeah.
I was asleep by 8. But then as I was telling you, off camera, I woke up at midnight, and it was almost divine, if you will. It was pretty cool. For almost 2 hours, I was just really excited and inspired about the opportunity that we have today to, share a little bit of our experience organically, and in hopes that it may bring some hope to some households that struggle in addiction and alcoholism.
Yes, for sure. And we are going to get into all that with your story. So I'm excited. I want to, before we really get into that, I want to, just for the listeners, go into a little bit about your background and, kind of focus on when you realized, I guess, when you were younger that you were a gifted athlete and that you knew like that was what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So even though I live in Texas, I'm from West Virginia, so this accent is hillbilly born, and we call that state almost heaven. I have a great childhood experience. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I've got 2 great parents, a family that used to have reunions every summer. I grew up playing in the woods and fishing in the creeks and barefoot and all that good stuff. And I adopted a passion for the sport of football at a very young age. I stood on the sidelines of my brother's teams, holding the water bottles, excited to get in the game during the timeouts and just be a small part of that event. And it really resonated with me. I couldn't wait till it was my turn, and that turn came when I was in 9th grade in high school. And just the passion for football, as you mentioned, took me to a lot of places. It got me into college and got me into the NFL. But at a young age, it really, in hindsight, filled this vacancy. My parents also got divorced at a young age, and so my football career started on the heels of that event in my life. And so I really feel like, like most teenagers, I was struggling to kind of find my clique or find my place and space, and that sport really became that. It's also where I, found my first drug and all those things. But
Yeah.
you referenced the question of like when I realized I was talented. My story is like I never thought I was talented, and the message that resonated with me most was the adults in the room kind of piggybacked off that.
Mm-hmm.
They, they were quick to tell me what I wasn't
Yeah.
instead of, possibly what I could be. And so I really adopted this chip on my shoulder, this mindset that I'm going to prove the world wrong,
Right.
and I'm going to go harder, longer than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I did. And, I'm proud of the work ethic that I adopted as a result of that. But I never really felt like I was the talented one on the team.
Yeah. And so when you eventually, you played in college for Marshall.
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
Yes, I love the Thundering Herd. It's a very special moment in my life. My dad is actually a college athlete as well, and he played for Marshall. and that story wasn't really something that was shared growing up. There's some tragedy that occurred with that university. There was a plane
Mm-hmm.
crash on November 14th, 1970. Wasn't something talked about in our household because it hit really close to home, like it did for a lot of families from Huntington, West Virginia. Um, but yeah, when it was finally my turn, I walked on to Marshall. I wasn't given a scholarship. I had to earn that, and I did. But I was just surrounded by really talented, men with a lot of, chips on their shoulder
Yeah.
too. Like Randy Moss was on our team, and Randy's battling cancer right now. And shout out to my boy and just prayers for him and
Yeah,
what he's walking
absolutely.
through. He was reintroduced to the Super Bowl, pregame special. I was really excited to see him there. It was an emotional return. But like Randy was a receiver, Pennington was our quarterback. I just had all these really amazing men in my life. They were great in football, and some of them are great in life. And so Marshall's a really special time, for me. Really enjoyed, my time there. It's also where the insanity started kicking in around my addiction.
Yeah, and that's what I'm curious about is kind of the culture that was going on then. And you mentioned, you never thought you were good or, however you said it. And so how that kind of correlated with this, like, I'm going to prove to the world the culture of football and the locker room. And, I obviously don't know anything about that, and how that maybe played into the substances providing you something.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, for me, my experience, I think every athlete's experience is different. And I feel like I'm really fortunate to have the one I had. We were really good. We won a lot of games. Actually, our record in the 4 years, that I was eligible to play there was 50-4. We won 50 games,
Oh
lost
my
only four,
gosh.
had
Wow.
2 undefeated seasons, and pretty proud to say that I was a captain in one of those undefeated seasons my senior year. And that school dates all the way back to the 1800s, and it's only had 2 undefeated seasons, and I was blessed to be on both of them. So the culture was that of just high accountability, incredible work ethic. You were early to every meeting, you stayed late to every practice, you gave, you went the extra mile, and the culture was really monitored itself.
Hmm.
So very pressure,
Yeah.
and so to kind of relieve myself of that pressure and the academic stress on top of it. I was kind of a weekend warrior.
Yeah.
In football, there's this sense of there's 2 parts of the year. There's the in season, and there's a certain way that you show up, responsibly in that time. It's very
Hmm.
important. But then there's this off season, which is the majority of your year, and that's training and academia and all those things. But for me, it was time to party.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Right.
we won a bunch of games last year, and now I'm somebody on campus.
Yes.
So the ego gets inflated, and the parties get bigger, and I stay up later, and sometimes miss a class here or there, and
Hmm.
and a tutor kind of helps and cover the gap. But it's crazy as I progressed through my career and, became invariably a starter and a captain and a leader, the off season crept into the season,
Yeah.
and just one of the stories I was reminded of last night actually was we would get drug tested regularly by our institution, which is Marshall, but then we'd also have NCAA random drug tests,
Hmm.
which there's nothing random about them because, we were Boise State before Boise State ever was. For the viewers that are paying attention, like those are the group of five, school that usually has had a lot of success. And so as we had our success, NCAA would come in and test us more. Well, I love
Hmm.
pot. Like I'm smoking weed all the time.
Yeah.
And in the off season, the whole thing, the theory was, need 30 days before you can pass a UA. But it's just like spring break would fall at a certain time, and then you'd be eligible to test. And so you'd always push the envelope, and 30 days turned into 3 weeks, would turn into 14 days. And it's like, well, I could drink vinegar and large amounts of water and go to, sweatshops. And I did all
Right.
that stuff just to try to pass UA tests. And
Did it work?
it did, actually. And long story short, it turns out they weren't testing for street drugs anyway.
Oh,
They
no.
were testing for, you know, steroids and all
Yep.
those other things. But I even went as far to ask our quarterback for his urine because he was a goody two shoes. He was a good friend of mine. He had an illustrious career. Chad would probably hate me for saying this, but like I would get others to pee for me,
Yeah.
and then I would hide it, And if you just think about that, I know it's kind of a nasty thought, but just walking into the training room and you have a trainer who's supposed to watch you, perform this, test. And one time the bottle that I would keep it in ruptured. And so Chad's pee ended up all over me. And I kind of look up at the trainer, like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm obviously not. Like, can we do this another time?" He's like, "Yeah, just get out of here."
No,
And so the
wet your
insanity around that,
pants.
the embarrassment around that, right?
Right.
You think that would be enough for like, Jason, your
Hmm.
scholarship and everything hinges on this opportunity. You're
Yeah.
finally getting your shot. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Smoking weed. But I didn't know that, I was beginning to lose the power of choice and chasing that, high was more important than the consequence of other people's urine
Yeah.
on me. So there
Well,
you
and
go.
that's what when you were talking, I was thinking like, were you thinking that it was normal to like going through your brain? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Because all my teammates, well, not all of them, but the teammates I chose to hang out with
yes,
were, living the same life.
right.
We were all, hitting the bongs and doing all that college stuff,
Yes.
right? And it's so easy to just kind of put that in the, I'm a kid, I'm in college, this is the college life. You're supposed to, go rush and overdrink and OD, or for us, it was like alcohol poisoning was really popular back in the 90s because people would just drink too much. It
Hmm.
was so commonly accepted
Yeah.
and often celebrated. And for us, the more we won, the more the community just kind of turned, a blind eye.
Yeah.
Cops too. I'd get pulled over, inebriated. They'd find out who I was, and sometimes even just take me home.
Yeah.
And that just allowed me to buy into this double standard that was my Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde
Hmm.
life of, you know, being an alcoholic, an addict, and a college athlete.
Yeah. And so you mentioned yesterday when you were doing a group at Impact that your, I guess, alcoholism and addiction started kind of progressing when you were in the NFL. So when you, I guess, when you got the call from the Arizona Cardinals that you were going to be on the team, what was that like, and what was your using like at that point?
It's a great question. So kind of to give you some context, Sarah, I was in Tampa Bay, Florida at the time. I'd recently graduated from Marshall University. My senior year, we went undefeated. 11 of my teammates were in the NFL, which was unprecedented for a school of our size. 4 of them were drafted. Chad, our quarterback, Pennington, was the first quarterback taken in the 2000 draft. And the sixth quarterback was Tom Brady, but I'm a little biased to Chad for
Right.
reasons we may get into. But anyway, I'm in Tampa Bay because I got this agent in my life. Everyone either got drafted or got a phone call after the draft. I didn't. And he had already had me believing that I was worthy of that type of an opportunity.
Hmm.
I was prepared just to go get my master's. He talked me into going and playing arena ball. So I'm in Tampa Bay playing arena ball. I was in my 5th week with that team. I got inserted into that team late because their season wasn't aligned with the NFL season. So they'd already gone through their camp. So I really had to work my way into being accepted. Now, what was going on in my personal life was so crazy. The college girlfriend, and the things that we were doing and decisions we had made really had me in this state of I just need to run. I need to get
Yeah.
away from West Virginia. I need to get away from this relationship, and I know when I do that, then no longer will drugs be an option for me.
Hmm.
So I went to Florida with my first geographical, if you will,
Yes.
with dead set on I'm going to just focus on football. I'm not going to use. And so what was my using like? It took me like a week to find out the guys that were, smoking the blunts and rolling the dice. And so I was right back in that old lifestyle. And so when Arizona called, I just finished playing my first arena ball game, and it was terrible. Like I had had my worst performance without getting the details. I was just so upset with myself. I was so insecure about my decisions. I was high. I was just in a really scared place.
Hmm.
I get home, answer machines, Arizona Cardinals. They asked me to come, out for a physical. I thought it wasn't real. The next message was my dad, like, hey, there's this scout from Arizona. You need to call him back. So anyway, I invariably flew to Arizona late in the whole process in the year of 2000. I went out there in June, took a physical, passed all the exams, and got my first opportunity to go into camp. Now I went into camp with 130 plus, football players, many of which were on that team the very, previous year, some of which were drafted and given a lot of money, and others were like me, were brought in from either a college or another team. So highly competitive environment,
Yeah.
thrust into that very late into the process. Really, no one thought I had a chance of even making the team. So pressure,
Hmm.
fear, another geographical location, all those was what was my summer of 2000. But I was excited that, here's the shot and I'm going to take advantage of it. Only 53 were going to make the team, and invariably, I ended up being on the practice squad. Enjoyed a 4-year career, but that's just kind of the context of how I entered into that world. I wasn't drafted. I didn't get any signing bonus. I was a 1 year, and back to kind of the sport and institution of football. It was very popular for a coach to use your liabilities against you, and you're in film. So you go and practice all day and train all day, and then you spend your evenings with your little position group. And mine were the offensive linemen. And we'd be watching the film with our coach who we looked up to, like we hung on every word.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, those words were, Jason, this isn't good enough. You're not this, you're doing this. You're like,
Yeah.
it just resonated. Like I didn't have enough.
Yeah.
And so and you better come tomorrow or we're going to put you on a flight back to West Virginia.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal. And it really kind of hurt me, but also motivated me.
So was that fueling your beliefs already that you had, or would you say that kind of happened when you were there?
No, it was, I already possessed this idea of myself that I lack.
Yeah.
Like the spirit of lack already existed within me, and that fire was fanned by many adults, who were motivated by fear as well. I mean,
Right.
coach wanted to win, and Arizona wasn't winning, and they were all on the chopping block. And our head coach was cut my first year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I imagine the immense amount of, pressure that was on them to get people like me to perform.
Yeah.
But anyway, Arizona was a great experience in the sense that, I got to play with Emmitt Smith and Aeneas Williams and Mean Joe Green was one of the coaches, and just all these childhood people that I looked up to were my teammates. Jake the Snake, the quarterback at my wife's alma mater, was our quarterback. He became a really close friend. Pat Tillman was on our team. So there was a lot of people to look up to, but I always gravitated towards the crowd that was drinking more than they should, staying out later than you were supposed to, just because that was where I felt safe.
Yeah.
And that's where I could be who I wanted to be, which is just a drunk,
right.
And an addict. And so that's where I gravitated towards.
Well, and so I'm assuming when you would go drink and party and do all the things, like that took you out of that fear or the lack that you mentioned about not being good enough or, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And so that's, I think, why a lot of people at that level drink the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's either trying to chase something that they experience on Sunday, or they're trying to run for something that scares the snot out of them. And for me, it was both. And it really, the game changer for me was when I took pills for the first time. That was after I got injured playing the Chargers. My shoulder popped out. Percocets were introduced into my life immediately after the game. It was the 4th preseason game. I was, again, like up against the chopping block. There were 17 that were going to be cut the next day, and chances were it was going to be me. I played the whole game with a shoulder that kept popping in and popping out. It was excruciatingly painful, and on the bus, I talked to the starting center. It's kind of my pseudo sponsor at the time.
Yeah.
And he'd had 21 surgeries. He'd had an illustrious career. He'd won a Super Bowl with the Rams. I'm like, Mike, what do I do? What happened? And I confided in him. And I'll never forget, he opened up the lapel of his jacket and he pulled out a bottle of Perks and he said, you take 2 of these and you don't tell anybody anything. And I followed those instructions, and my whole world changed, because that's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
Was cover the pain and hide from the fear, and Perks allowed me to do that. And then this whole other world in the NFL I was exposed to, and it turns out a lot of our team was taking pills, and to the point, Sarah, I'd let everybody go to practice when I'd start running low or out, and I'd start rummaging through all the lockers, and I'd find other people's pills, and I'd take those pills because I knew I had to buy myself another day or 2 days until I could go back to the doctor and not be ashamed, or he'd give me what I want.
Yeah. And was that affecting your performance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I didn't believe it at the time. I was in delusion at the time. I wanted to believe that it was allowing me to perform, because I was in so much pain.
Right.
And I told myself and just believed it, like I'm only going to take this when I'm the starter. I started 13 games over a 4-year career. So I'm just going to allow myself to sacrifice this when it's, and then it was, well, I'm only going to take this during football season, when I'm only going to take, and then I just took it all the time.
Yeah. Well, and that, I'm so glad you made that point, because with addicts and alcoholics, in general, not just the football players, but it's like we have these values and morals, and then slowly over time they start to go down and go down, and then they're just gone by the end of it. Like, and because you knew the difference between right and wrong, you wanted to perform, you wanted to be on the team, you respected your players, your coach, everything, yet you couldn't pull it off. And I think that's important to point out. So thank you.
It's a great point. Thank you for pointing it out. I was raised by great parents. I was born in the Methodist church. I mean, I believe there was a God. That thing kind of all shifted at a young age. But for me, there was I knew what right and wrong was, and I
Yeah.
knew I was wrong, and I knew I was potentially squandering a lifetime opportunity. I mean, the essence of my career can be summed up with I had everything this world could give someone like me at my fingertips.
Yeah.
Like a nobody from nowhere, from rural West Virginia. I'm enjoying an illustrious career. I've made millions of dollars at a young age. It's all right there. And I just couldn't hang on to it.
Yeah.
And I knew that in the moment. I knew it was slipping away. I probably even was awake to why it was slipping away, but I didn't have the ability to stop it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to. I
Yeah.
absolutely wanted to. I was newly married, going into my 4th year. It was a pivotal time in my life. I found the love of my life. Like life was changing. All the papers were stating I was going to be the starter. Mike had retired. I was literally the only guy left on the roster, and then things just didn't work out that way.
And so what did that look like when the using was like really progressing and into that 4th year? How did that kind of all unfold?
I was high for every meeting. I was high for every workout. And the delusion, the lie I was telling myself is no one knew.
Yeah.
I mean, my inner circle knew.
Right.
Like that crowd from Nebraska that I like to drink with, they kind of knew.
Yeah.
But the coaches didn't know. They absolutely knew.
Mm-hmm.
After the 4th game of our regular season, I got, pulled aside like we all do. And
Yeah.
it looks like your position coach comes up to you and say, "Hey, Jason, go get your playbook. The head coach would like to meet with you." And that's
Uh-oh.
code in that industry for your ass is getting ready to get fired.
Yeah.
And we were prepared for that interaction in 2-a-days leading up to the final cuts. But during the season, those were very uncommon. So it caught me completely off guard that day. And I was high.
Yeah.
And it was after the 8 a.m. team meeting or 7:30 a.m. team meeting. We were breaking from the team meeting, going to our position meetings. And coach came up to us and gave me those words and instructions. I went to get my playbook and I started sobbing.
Oh.
I was now this childhood dream I was living is ending.
Yeah.
And as I walked up the stairs to go meet with the head coach, the guy that you hold at the highest regard, his name was Coach Dave McGinnis, great man, and gave me a lot of grace on this day. I've seen it through HBO productions where they're just like, "Hey, we got to let you go. It's a 30-second meeting, shake hands." He spent a long time with me. He acknowledged the fact I'd been playing injured. He celebrated the fact that I was kind of falling on the sword for the team, and he gave me the option to fix my shoulder, or if my agent and I decided, cut me and allow me to go find an opportunity somewhere else. But the truth of the story, nobody probably wanted me, and it was already in the middle of the season. No one was looking for a center, so we opted to fix the shoulder. But I left that facility just hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer had a connection to the doctors that would willingly give me the pills I needed. I had very little of my script left. I had a trash bag of all my cleats and personal belongings, and everything I'd worked so hard for a lifetime was over in moments. And it broke me.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to go home and let my wife know that I was just fired from the NFL.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to. So I went to the bar.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah,
And then you got surgery on your shoulder.
I did.
And then I'm assuming the pills just continued after that.
I'd already built up a huge tolerance, unbeknownst to this incredible physician that specialized in shoulders in the Phoenix area. And so, the original script he gave me didn't work. So I went back to him, and he introduced me to Oxy, Cottons, and it was the light, 10 milligram deal. And I went through that bottle quickly, and then he would never give me another pill. I thought that was really awesome of him trying to do the right thing, but it was already too late.
Yeah.
And so now I find myself in sorted places, meeting with sorted people as a freshly, you know, relieved, NFL football player who was a pillar in that community on TV, doing a lot of kids philanthropy. And now I'm in the alleyways, with drug dealers trying to get my fix.
Yeah.
And that quickly spiraled completely out of control.
And so did you have any sort of plan for like what you wanted to do after you left the Cardinals, or was it more of just like tunnel vision? I need the drugs, I need the alcohol. I mean, because that was my experience. Like I was just like in this warped world of like, this is just how I live now. This is just how it is. So
I remember my wife one day coming to me as months, maybe a year after I was let go. She's like, Jason, you just can't party every day. Like, you need to move on. Like, in code, you need to get a job.
yeah.
Like, we're married here. Like, let's. And I'm like, well, why not? Because at that time I still had a lot of money in the bank, and I needed to figure it out, right?
hmm
Delusion, spiraling out of control, and invariably led to a place where she was no longer willing to, have a front row seat to my death and destruction.
hmm
Offered me with an ultimatum. I went to a detox center. It turned out to be a psych ward at Banner Health. I was there for 8 days with a bunch of droolers and people there for various other reasons.
hmm
I'll never forget the H&I meetings that came in and just kind of shared with me that there was hope and a way out. I don't remember anything they said, but I remember how they made me feel in a time in my life where I was hopeless. They gave me an ounce of it.
Yeah.
I left there, didn't stay sober, methadone clinic. I'm an opiate addict.
Right.
So I just need the pain to stop.
Yeah.
I just need the physical withdrawals to not exist. And if I could just get on the other side of the physical withdrawals,
Yes.
I know I got what it takes to move on and to the next chapter of my life. I really believe that.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that's how I was too. And so many people don't understand what the disease of addiction is. And I really believed if I can just get it out of my system and like reset my body, I can just get back to the way it was. And I had no idea, one, what I was up against, but two, that it's progressive and it just gets
Absolutely.
worse, not better.
And the mental component of this disease, I
hmm
was ignorant to that. And so were the people closest to me. It was evident to Larky and anyone that knew me well or shared a home with me knew I was sick. I mean, I
hmm
was physically ill.
Yeah.
And so it was clear to everyone I needed to get on the other side of that physical withdrawal. But what no one knew about was this obsession of the mind that, I got a body that can't use, Sarah,
Yeah.
and it can't drink, but I got a mind that in that state will tell me that I absolutely can, or this time will be different, or it's the job, or it's the loss of job, or it's the geographical location, or it's the lack of income, or it's the ADHD, or it's I'm a bipolar, or it's I'm
Yeah.
depressant, and even though some of these things may or may not be real or fancied, what wasn't known was I was suffering from a disease of addiction,
hmm
and I needed a spiritual experience and an
Yeah.
awakening.
Yes. And so tell me about the day before you got sober
Mm,
and where you were, what that looked like, what you were feeling, how
mm,
you got help.
mm.
Walk us through that.
So it was in July, 2006, on the 22nd, and that day was just like most days at that time in my life. I was living in my car. It was a nice car, just a shitty house. The master bedroom didn't really work for me.
Not enough room.
I had my windows rolled up with blankets in it. I was in Phoenix. I was parked outside of a Walgreens. The car was running just to keep the AC on because it would reach temperatures of, above 120 degrees. No one's taking my call. The dope man had since died, and he was a kid too. He was younger than me. I even went to his funeral. Um, I was over $1 million in debt. I was 29 years old, separated from my wife. We owned homes. She made it clear I wasn't welcome in any of them. I didn't want to live anymore, if I'm being quite honest. I had no reason to live.
Yeah.
I'd let everybody that ever cared about me or gave me an opportunity down. I'd squandered the only opportunity this world was ever going to give someone like me. And I did it publicly.
hmm
And then my phone rang. And it was Lark, my wife. And I don't remember what she said. I just remember the message was, I want you to come home. And I had to have wondered why she would make such a call, Sarah, because I was not a good husband at that time in my life. I was abusive. I was neglective. I was a thief. I was absent. I was just not good. Um, but I went home, and what was going on, unbeknownst to me, was an intervention. What had happened the night prior is I'd worked my way into a neighbor's house, stole some liquor, worked my way into a bar, tied one on. I couldn't afford to buy drinks. I smuggled in my own. I made a whole mess of myself. There was a live band apparently that day. I worked my way up on stage, got thrown out of that bar.
Mm.
I was being counseled in the middle of that morning by a bouncer. That's how bad my life had gotten. They felt pity for
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
And I woke up the next day and was asked to come home. Larky received a phone call from someone at that tavern who said, I think he's going to die.
Wow.
If you're going to do anything, you better do it now.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any resources. We didn't have any money. We didn't know what to do. She called my best friend and former college quarterback, Chad Pennington. He was going to do his 7th year with the Jets as the face of that organization. And just said, I'm sure, Chad, I think he's going to die if we don't do something. And I'll never.
You got this.
When your darkest day comes and someone 12 steps you, or someone hits the pause button on their life and they do an act of kindness and generosity that's so overwhelming. I mean, 20 years later, it still gets me, obviously.
Yeah.
And so he stopped what he was doing and he provided the resources and the opportunity for me to get sober. And what he did is he flew our best friend, Sean, out to grab me. And Sean was the guy I drank with. He was the guy I used with. And so that next morning when I came to in our home and Sean's in my bedroom, I knew the gig was up. And I was blessed with a level of surrender, like, I know they're fixing to take me somewhere and I'm willing to go.
Yeah.
Chad made it all happen. We went back to Knoxville, Tennessee. His father's the one that picked me up at the airport, which is a whole testimony behind Coach P, but he was the guy I did not want to get to know because he was that Jesus freak. He was that believer. He was that guy, but he was also the college quarterback's dad who was in the Heisman race. And so he had VIP access during our college career. I didn't want anything to do with him. I just wanted to go get loaded.
Yeah.
So I kept him at arm's length. He's the guy at the airport that picked me up. And he took me to my bed and breakfast, which is, what I call the treatment industry. And I'll never forget when they went through check-in, they were really kind and gracious and they stroked my ego. We went into this boardroom and all the administrators were there and they were really, presenting what life was going to look like for me. And it was nice. But at the end of it, there was a business transaction that needed to take place. There was money that needed to be paid, that was owed and that needed to be deposited. And I didn't have it. And Coach P didn't even flinch. He pulled out his checkbook from his lapel. He wrote the large amount of money they were asking for. He slid it across the table, and he said, when you need more, you call me. He got up from his chair. He came around. He gave me a hug. And as I wept in his arms, he just whispered in my ear, it's going to be okay, Jason.
Aww.
And I was in a place where I was willing to believe him.
Yeah.
And that's what my intervention looked like.
That's incredible. And you mentioned about like letting everybody down in your world. And we let people down. However, it is somewhat of a delusion because with your story that you just described, you have all these people, this army that's still willing to help you. And that was my experience. That's a lot of people's experience. It's like we think there's nothing left to live for. We've burned all of our bridges. There's no hope, but there is hope. Like there is. They love us. However they're doing it, even if that's, hey, I'm not going to talk to you, you're completely, whatever. But just from seeing, the women I work with and the men that come through Impact, like the families and friends care and they love, they're just scared. But I did want to point that out because I think that's such a thought that goes through most every addict and alcoholic. Like, just like, I burned everything to the ground. Like there's nothing. What am I going to do kind of thing.
And the hopelessness that you're referring to, in my experience, doesn't just infect the alcoholic and the addict. That permeates throughout the home, throughout the family. It looks different. For me, the hopelessness looked like no one wants anything to do with me. I've squandered every opportunity this world's given me. Life is over as I know it. I just want to die.
Yeah.
The hopelessness for the wife and the mom and the dad and the best friend is like, I don't want my friend to die.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Why can't he just stop drinking and stop using? Why doesn't he see how beautiful his life could be if it had the absence of this substance, right? So it's just this devastating hopelessness that really permeates and resonates throughout the whole family dynamic.
Yes.
And it's why I believe not just the alcoholic or addict needs treatment and resources, but I really believe those closest to him or her do as well.
Yeah. I know. And that's something we talk about a lot on here is the family piece and just how they need their own healing because a lot of them don't know that because they're just like, look at my loved one. They need
Mhm.
help. Let's get them help. And if they get help, then he'll be okay. But there's so much stuff that goes on before that and trauma and all these things that can really help them too.
Yeah, it's a
So,
common trap a lot of families fall in that I've worked with, and even in my own home, like my wife, you know, it oftentimes feels like, Jason, if you just call, your someone, your sponsor, if you just do a little bit more work, if you just go to another meeting, then we'll be okay,
yeah.
right? And that's a trap in early addiction and recovery that a lot of people fall in. The focus becomes helping the addict and alcoholic, and although that's really important,
Yeah.
there's help out there for all of the
Yes.
family. And there's one thing I'd like to share
Yes.
that happened. I'm a church damaged guy. Like I grew up, as I mentioned, the Methodist church. It was a behavior type of model that I caught as a kid when my parents divorced. That was no longer a priority. I just really had trouble with this God thing, and it wasn't the notion that there was a God. For me, I absolutely knew there was one. I just knew he didn't love me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in sober living, there was this thing called Celebrate Recovery. And it went on Thursday nights. And some people in our house wanted to attend. I'm so grateful I got in the car and we went there. It was this warehouse, it was in the strip malls and nowhere in Knoxville, Tennessee, right? And I walk into this big room and I'll never forget, man. The first thing was the song. I don't remember her name. I don't even remember what she looked like. I remember she had red hair and she's playing this piano and she has this angelic voice. And she's singing the same lyric over and over again. And the lyric is, I could sing of your love forever. And she just kept singing, I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. And simultaneously, I'm in sober living. I'm going to IOP. I know what it's like to plan my life around a meeting. I've got a sponsor. I'm involved in a 12-step program. I'm doing the work. The old hats in the room are saying, God, you can pick a God of your own understanding. It doesn't have to be that one that you knew as a child.
Yeah.
I can sing of your love forever. And I'm just like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like God's love. And it started there. That was the beginning and the end for me. That was in a moment that was emotional. I wept. And then the so-called preacher comes on next. I don't remember his name. I don't remember his message. I remember he was an addict, a heroin addict like me. And he started with that. I remember how he made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
That's what resonates with me. And what
Yeah.
I felt on this fateful Thursday night was hope for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm.
There's hope. God is love. I'm forgiven.
Yeah.
Like, and I just feel like the Chads of the world, and there's plenty of Chads in my life. The Sarahs, the podcast, the impacts, the cornerstones, the work we do. It's really one entity working through multiple vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's the God of love expressing himself uniquely to me in a way that I can be awake to and be grateful for. And that is the power that I chase today. Like
Yeah.
that is that's what wakes me up at midnight before a podcast in
Yeah.
Birmingham, Alabama, because I feel like there's this message that's resonating with me because of how important this platform you've created is. And what an opportunity we have to hopefully reach out to that addict that's out there suffering, that may be living in their car, that wife that's losing hope, that
Yeah.
mom that just wants her child to just stop drinking. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is a way out,
Yeah.
and I'm just grateful that I know it today.
Yes. Yeah. That's amazing. So because you mentioned like you went to that meeting and you felt hope for the first time. Was it prior to that, was it hard for you to buy into the solution because of maybe being a professional athlete, being in the culture and like working hard and you got to just make it happen and that sort of thing? Whereas with recovery, it's more of like, I need to surrender.
Surrender is a huge part of it. It started when Sean showed up at my door. I began the process of being where my feet were and just allowing other people to do the thinking and the driving, which was a gift of surrender, a gift of acknowledging that I don't have all the answers, because you're right. What you just teed up there was a life built on self-will.
Mm-hmm.
was a life where I was told I wasn't enough or I was lacking in this area, this area, and this area. And my response to that, I'm going to show up early. I'm going to stay late. I'm going to lift more. I'm going to work harder. And then invariably, the results of those actions was success, 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 as this world would define success.
Right.
But yet, as I became more and more successful on the outside, I became more and more miserable on the inside. For the longest time, I tried to fix this internal condition through external means. And that looked like achievement on the football field. It looked like the nicer car, the hot wife, which I still have, praise God, right? It's just like, I needed to feel okay in here, and that was always going to be born of something out here.
Yeah.
And so when I got to this recovery, they're like, you need to surrender to win. You need to give it up and give it to God. I'm
Yeah.
just like, that is so opposite of anything I've ever experienced.
Right.
But in the world of addiction and alcoholism, it was absolutely the first step that was necessary for me to take, just to really just surrender to the fact that I couldn't do this alone.
Yeah.
I made that decision in this treatment experience that I referred to, and I really just abandoned myself to the God of my understanding, asked for his help, and the courage just to carry it out.
Yeah.
And I began to start listening to these old hats that came before me and start to adopt these principles that they were teaching me through this 12-step program that they were living. I heard what they said, but I watched how they walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to gravitate towards the people that were walking in a way that I wanted to walk. Because
Yeah.
all I wanted to be was respected again. All I wanted to be was loved again. I didn't set out to be a pillar in my family or a pillar in my community or a pillar in recovery or any of those things. I set out just to respect myself, love myself, and forgive myself
Mm-hmm.
so that I could begin to do that with and for others.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And I'm grateful for it.
Well, and I would assume that you were probably able to be surrendered just because you had kind of tried you had already done the like self-will of trying to not have these things happen in your life. I don't think you set out to go live in your car. And so you're trying your very best. And that's what's so amazing when an addict or an alcoholic can have that moment of surrender, because it's like, I'm done. I've tried it all. There's nothing left but to trust this power. Like there's literally nothing left to do. So
Today, on the other side of my recovery and being a recovered alcoholic and addict, I'm as grateful for the failures as I am the successes.
Mhm.
Because I went to sports psychologists, psychiatrists. I tried, ADHD medication. I went to different physicians. It was started orthopedic and then ended up, head doctors. So I went to various different doctors. I tried various different things. I went to detox. I went to hospitals. I went to psych wards. I went to the 12-step meetings. I was introduced to this fellowship that's anonymous. None of it worked. I wasn't really buying into any of it. I had to go and continue to try to control and enjoy and fail in that effort.
Mhm.
And then when I failed in that effort and got to that place that I described in the car, and then grace showed up and I was introduced again to a presentation that I was in a place I could accept and begin to live, whole thing shifted.
Yeah.
The whole thing shifted
Yeah.
because I'd been living a life in self. Like literally my default button is to wake up in the morning thinking about me.
Mhm.
What can I get out of this day? What can I do? Or what do I need not to do? It's all about Jason. And what's crazy about my life now is I wake up and I'm consciously asking for intervention so that I can think about others.
Right.
And I think that is the essence of recovery.
Yes.
I think constant servitude to others is what this whole life I attempt to live, today is all about. I would like to give you this. So there's a story that I'm a fan. I'm a long-haired Jew guy. I like Jesus, right? Like that's my guy, right? And it took a drunk to reintroduce me to that, and I'm grateful that they did. So there's this story about a time when the rabbi was teaching thousands of people, and it was a long lesson, and some of the guys that were following this teacher around says, "Look, man, the crowd's hungry. We need to eat." And so Jesus is like, "All right, well, let's stop. Bring me all the food you got." And they didn't have much of anything. And there's thousands of people in attendance. They had a few loaves of bread and a couple fishes. And he's like, "All right." He blessed the food, and then he asked his disciples to share it with the thousands. And I'm sure they're like, "Okay, like we'll do this in faith, but I don't think this is really going to work out." And it did. The story goes, not only did everybody eat, but everybody was satisfied. And moreover, there was food left over. I get a few things from this lesson. First, God's a multiplier. Like he wants to multiply in my life. He wants to multiply in others' lives. The next thing I get from it is when I live a life that's feeding others, I in turn get fed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the essence of recovery. Like I got here thinking about me. I stay here thinking about others. Like it's easy to preach on Sunday. It's easy to, talk sobriety around others that are recovered. It's a little more rewarding, I think, to sit on a couch across from an addict with a mother that's crying, and a family that just desperately wants their son to get help.
Yeah.
It's really cool to go to prisons and talk about the fact that there's hope even behind bars. It's really awesome to work, this program that's been introduced to me with people that are just starting the process and the light's starting to come on. Like the essence of the promises these old hats used to tell me about, like your life's going to take on a new meaning. The bright spot in your life is going to be the new people that come up in it. Like that's to me what this is all about. That's what gets me up in the morning. So it wakes me up at night. It's just like, did I do enough today? What am I doing tomorrow? This is really cool.
Yeah. And that for me, I wasn't even in my train of thought. I didn't even know this world, this life existed. Just because I had been in my world for so long, I didn't know there was another world.
That's why when you said you woke up and the first thought of not of yourself was that you're going to help a lot of people, like that resonated with me. Because I want to believe I've always had a good heart that wanted to do for others, but I just got so blocked from the disease and I got so stuck on me. And really when I got to recovery, I thought I was just a bad person.
Yeah.
I'd done so many bad things. I was the sum of all those bad decisions. And therefore the shame and the guilt that I carried with me was the sum of all those parts. But what I learned was I wasn't a bad person who needed to just get good. I was a sick person who needed to get well.
Yeah.
And when that was presented to me, and I was really able to get awake to that, it was extremely liberating for me and my family, I believe.
Yeah.
Like I'm just sick.
Right.
And I need to get well.
Yes.
And the good news is we not only get well, we get placed in a state of, neutrality and we get recovered and like life takes on a whole nother trajectory.
Yeah.
I don't have my old life back. And you know what? I don't even want it.
Right.
I'm grateful for it, but I've been reborn in this new life, in this new dimension, in this new world of spirit where it's more powerful than any line I ever did, any pill I ever took, any binge I ever went on. And I'm not hungover the next day. I'm actually filled with purpose and value. For me, it was an identity crisis. For the longest time, I identified as being the football player in the room. It was important for me for others to know that.
Yeah.
Like it's just because I was so insecure that it was one of the things that at times made me feel whole, accepted, valued, appreciated, loved. It's like, oh, this is the guy that played football. What happens when I'm in a room with other football players? And I know a lot, and I know a lot that are better than me.
Yeah.
It's just when my identity is from anything in this world, I'm always going to fall short and feel incomplete. But when my identity is in Christ or in God, in the Spirit, which I believe we are in, my identity changed. I had an identity crisis. One of my early resentment letters was to the institution of football. I was so mad at the way they treated me. When I let all that out, I let all that go, and I began to adopt a new identity, my world started to change.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And I think there are so many people out there that have the exact same experience, whether they're an athlete, they're identified with their current job, their marriage, their family, their school they went to. I mean, whatever.
Sarah, this whole world's in an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And we wear a lot of hats. Like you're a mother, you're an entrepreneur, I'm a business run owner, whatever. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
I'm a recovery, guy. Like I wear all these hats, but I am not any one of those things.
Right.
I am essentially the sum of many of those things under the umbrella of I'm a precious child of God. Like that's how I identify today. And you know what? It gets me in any room. It allows me to speak confidently in front of any audience. Didn't happen overnight. I didn't walk into the woods of darkness and despair and hopelessness overnight. And I darn sure didn't walk out of them overnight either.
Yeah.
But what I started to recognize is I could grab the hand of a couple people that walked ahead of me and I followed their lead. And before you know it, the sun came up.
Yeah.
And the Spirit came in. And life changed.
And that's so, so important because I just remember thinking I'm going to have this like lightning bolt experience and I'm just going to be this little angel and my whole life has changed. But it really was this more of a slow, gradual thing. And of course, it's like, I want immediate relief. But just continuing to take the action, to hold hands of others, to follow the lead of somebody that has a life that I want, not the external things like you talked about that we thought would fix it, but this freedom, this peace. This woman, she's laughing, she's having a great time. She's drank like I did and thought like I did, but she hadn't touched a drink in years. It wasn't about the drink. And so all of that. And you mentioned it earlier too, like how much this life does for you now. It's got to be better than the line or the pills or the drink. Because if it's not, then why would we be sober?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
If this wasn't vastly better.
Yeah.
Like the gap has to be huge. And it is. I think that's the good news for your viewers and the people that we come in contact with.
Yes.
One of my constant prayers is when they see me, let them see you and what's possible in a recovered man's life.
Yeah.
Like let them see the hope of what is actually possible when they start to, accept the principles that we try to live by. And I'll tell you this, the principles that were taught to me in this way of life, I apply in business. Bubba, is the owner of the company I'm blessed to run, and he's been sober for a long time. And he often tells me, he's like, man, don't get it twisted. I may sign the checks, but God's the one cashing them. We work for God. I'm in construction. That's a dog eat dog world. It's a very emotional time in someone's life when they're building a house or buying a house. It's oftentimes the largest investment in anyone's life.
Yeah.
So they're emotional,
right.
And I've got a spiritual toolkit for emotions, at least mine anyway. I can't take power over theirs, but I'm always called to treat them the way that, I'd want to be treated. And it's a lot easier to do that when I'm not in the insane world of addiction and trying to chase the next pill and manage my day as a result of my alcoholism. It's just, it's free. And the other thing, and the bigger thing is like, I love surrounding myself with people that have something I want. And over the 18 and a half years I've been sober, I was a 29-year-old boy when I got here. I'm a 47-year-old man now. What I want has evolved. I want to be around faith-based husbands that honor their wife. I want to be around fathers that are present in their children's life and that pour into them. I want to be around recovered men.
Yeah.
I want to be around business owners and operators that do it with honesty and integrity. I want to be around people that, are just as good when no one's looking as they are when everyone's watching.
Yeah.
Right. And so to the extent which is possible, God places those people in my life and I'm drawn to them. And then I'm intentional with those relationships because I want to connect to them, and I want them to pour into me. So I spoke to a group of kids this week and I'll stop with this. I know I drag on, but
no, you're good.
I get an opportunity to go around and do a lot of speaking engagements. And what I've been saying lately is I don't stand on any platform alone. When you look up here, you may only see me, kids, but what I want you to see is Coach P's right over there. This guy named Chad's right here.
Yeah.
There's this other Chad over there. My wife's right there. My dad, who I lost last year, is right over here. This platform is full of the men and women who have graciously poured into me so that I could be here today and pour into you. I stand on no platform alone. And so what I try to do is flip it and ask them who's standing on their platform. Sometimes it's hard in this disease, and when we feel like this terminal uniqueness that infects the entire family dynamic, like no one knows what we're going through. We're the only ones that's ever experienced this. We've got to keep a lid on this. We got to there's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
Right? Like when the humility of the surrender of someone just like, I need help. He needs help and I don't know what to do. Like, who are you going to let stay on your platform today?
Yeah.
And then as this world and life changes, whose platform are you willing to stand on? Because you and I are going to be dead and gone. I don't know when. Maybe on my flight home. I don't know. I'm ready. Could be 50 years from now. But when I'm gone, my hope is I'll be standing on someone's platform.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. And I guess to close out, you're talking a lot about what your life looks like today. What would you say you're most proud of? My unashamed faith in the God of my understanding, my willingness to share it with my kids and my wife. The humility that comes with accepting the fact that I don't know everything. The amends I've made to 11-year-old girl when I let her know that what daddy did today wasn't acceptable. Right. And I'm sorry, I want to own that. She's like, no, it's okay, Dad. No, I'm here to sit with you to let you know this is not okay. Yeah.
Right. It's just the inspiration that comes from living a life of purpose and meaning in the spirit for a God of your understanding and a life that has a lot of opportunity to serve others. I'm grateful for the efforts I make to serve my house first. And everything else is just icing on the cake.
I love it. I love it. Anything else you want to add
I
before we
mean, I
close
could
out?
speak for another hour, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you again, Sarah, for what you're doing. I know from experience, when you answer the call, like something like this, and you put yourself out there publicly or on any platform, you open yourself up to attacks, and I don't know what those look like for you, but I'm just going to rebuke them because what you're doing is awesome. The content you've already created is amazing. The people that are seeing it, their lives are going to be changed as a result of it. So I just want to celebrate that. And I want to thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you.
You're
It's very
welcome.
sweet. Thank you. All right. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. I hope today's conversation has inspired you, opened your mind, maybe even your heart. But remember, you're not alone. If you found this episode helpful, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We will have all of our social media accounts links in the description below, so you can find us on social. But until then, keep making an impact. Bye, y'all.